great pleasure, I'd like to introduce Beverly Johnson.
First of all, I was courted for about 5 years to do my memoir. And I said I'm too young to do my memoir. And so 5 years passed, and so I guess I'm old enough. So I decided to do my memoirs. So I decided that since I found the writer that I would do my book. And so there we are, you know, ready to do the book. And I'm like, well, where do you start? How do you put 60 years in 250 pages? Because, you know, I even found myself giggling through, you know, a lot of the book and, you know, crying in the crying parts. And I really had to pinch myself to remind me, hey, this is your story. And, you know, it's not so happy. But basically, the book, I decided if I was going to do the book, I was going to be very candid. And I was going to be very transparent, which I have been most of my life. But most people think they know me because I've been out there for so long, but they don't. And this was a chance for me to talk about all of the incidents and obstacles and challenges in my life that I feel made me the person that I am today. Duckling, I was a nerd. I loved to read. I was a competitive swimmer. My younger sister was the, you know, high yellow, you know, brick house, 5'2" body. My older sister was the, you know, 5'11" bronze, you know, Indian straight hair. We call it good hair. And then there was me, you know, tall, skinny, flat-chested, and an introvert, basically, but happy. Really happy. I remember my younger sister would get all the boys, and my older sister would get all the boys. And my younger sister, after she was so wonderful to me, after she would break up with her boyfriend, she would say, Beverly, I just broke up with Bud. Would you like him to be your boyfriend? I said, yeah, I would. She said, here's his number, call him up. So you know, I had no problem. I called up Bud. Hi, Bud, how you doing? He says, I said, Joanne said she broke up with you, and you're to be my boyfriend now. He says, no, I want Joanne. I said, she doesn't want you. You have to have me. And so, I mean, but it didn't bother me at all. You know, I was just, you know, I had bigger plans in my life. I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to, you know, swim in the Olympics, which I almost made. I wanted to, you know, I had all these aspirations as a kid, and I was bullied. You know, I remember walking across the stage, getting my honor roll certificate every month, and being booed, and it didn't bother me. You know, I was going to get my, you know, honor roll certificate. I just didn't care. Ultimately, you know, junior high school girls are mean, you know, and we would know that more, you know, being in the school system. And my best girlfriend, Dada, who I'm sorry she's not here with me today, she's in Buffalo and she couldn't get away because she's a teacher at the high school that we went to. But she was my lifelong friend. We grew up we were born in the same hospital, we're the same age, we grew up next door to each other, went to the same schools, we're lifelong from the day we were born friends. So the girls, the mean girls, jumped us at the bus stop, beat us up, we went down swinging. And there was just something about that just didn't sit well with me. Of course, it was a big upset in the family and you know, my families, and trying to get in touch with the girls, you know, the mean girls' families. And Donna and I, we just decided we were going to get them back one by one. And that's what we did. I remember this one day, you know, Sandra Warmley, who was the ringleader of the group, you know, big girl, you know, kind of, you know, the girl with the switchblade kind of girl. We're sitting on the porch, we're sitting on the front porch, right? And all of a sudden I catch out of the corner, it's Sandra. I run upstairs, put the Vaseline on my face, put my headband on my head, and my family like, where are you going? I said, I'll be right back. I see Sandra down the block, I start running. Sandra! She looked back and she she got kind of like, did I say, was she afraid? And she started going fast. I just kept going, Sandra, Sandra. She looked back, she started walking faster and faster. Isn't that funny? How they're afraid now that she's by herself. I called her, it wasn't very long. She was down on the ground. But anyways, it's so interesting that in the group, in the gang, she was all this, but she was, and it's really interesting, when I go back to Buffalo now, she says, Beverly, remember me as Sandra? Remember when you beat me up on the court? Yeah, I do remember Sandra. Well, we sit down and we have a drink at the Humboldt bar there on Jefferson Avenue. So, I mean, it's just, so I always had that kind of, fire in my belly to want to do something. I wanted to be a lawyer because in the 60s, when they had, the black and white television, I don't know if a lot of you know that the television used to be black and white. I remember watching the civil rights movement on the television, and I remember being so moved by that, and watching, because we're in Buffalo, New York, and of course there's racism and prejudice there too, but not like it was, in the South, and the dogs being sicked on the people, and Martin Luther King, and my parents were kind of overprotective, so we really couldn't have those kind of conversations in our home. And I always wanted to, be a lawyer because I thought that there was some way that I could contribute, I could help. And so when the last year before I was going to go to college, because I wanted to go to school way away from my family, I wanted to go to school, far away, so I went to Boston. But I thought it was far away. But and homesick for the first 6 months, crying. I want to go home. My father's like, yeah, if you don't want to come home, come home. But anyways, and I finally, but that last summer, before I went to college, my mother said, you can't work at Beaver Island as a lifeguard. I'm like, what? What do you mean? She said, you have to work in a boutique at the Jenny shop on Main Street. I'm like, why? She said, because you don't have any clothes to go to school. All you have is sweats, jeans and cutoffs. You've got to work at the Jenny shop and to get a wardrobe for college. So this is my first time ever being in that boutique. Anyways, I didn't even know why we were there. We couldn't afford the clothes, even with my discount. But anyways, I went to the Jenny shop. Of course, I became the #1 clerk, with the sales and everything. And there was a woman there by the name of Mimi, a French woman, and she was always talking about, if you ever decide not to be a lawyer, please be a model. And I was like, a model? I'm like, I'm going to be a lawyer. Hello, everybody in my family goes to college. My older brother, my older sister are college graduates at the University of Buffalo. Everybody goes to college. And she kept talking about this modeling thing, and I was going, oh, Mimi, you're so cute, you're so nice. Cuckoo. But anyways, the last day before I was going to leave to go to college, at the end of that summer, and I did have my little wardrobe together, she took a piece of paper and she wrote this woman's name down. She said, if you ever, I wish I had a French accent, if you ever change your mind about being a lawyer, I want you to call this woman. So, just to make her feel nice, I took my wallet and I was, oh yes, Mimi, I'll put it right here, thank you so much. I'm thinking to myself, she's absolutely out of her mind. I've got it, and I go to college, and I work at the Roxbury YWCA teaching swimming part-time, making $28 a week. I said, I finally get into the college thing, I'm not homesick anymore, and I decide, hey, I think I'm going to stay here and work in Boston for the summer and not go back to Buffalo. I'm kind of, Harvard's there and Tufts there. It's a great place to go to school. And at the last minute, job cuts. I don't have a job. I'm like, oh my God. I called Buffalo. They gave my lifeguard job to somebody at Beaver Island. And now I have no job. And there were girls there that kind of taken me underneath their wing that went to my college. They were from New York City. And they said, I was telling them what happened, and I don't have a job, and I don't know what I'm going to do. And they said, well, why don't you just be a model? I'm going, what is this modeling thing? I mean, they went and grabbed the magazine, they opened it up, they said, see, this is a model. And she makes $75 an hour. I took the magazine, I said, just standing there with her hands over here? They said, yes. $75 an hour? And I remembered that number of that woman. I ran there and I found that wallet. I was like tearing out to get that number of the woman and I kept it. I found it. And then the next thing was, I had to convince my parents. Oh my God. My father said, a model? There's no such thing as model. You mean streetwalker? No, absolutely not. And my mother was kind of like listening intently. And it was just fate. It was just fate. My mother came with me to New York City against my father's wishes. We went up to Condé Nast, Glamour magazine, and Vogue magazine, and they said, you know, we want to take your daughter on a 10-day trip for Glamour magazine, and we really like her. And I looked at my mother and said, you see, I told you. And I went back home and I was like all happy and telling my sisters and brothers, and they were like, you? They picked you? My brother said, did you tell me you have better looking sisters and brothers at home? I can't believe they picked you. And my father, he finally kind of got used to the idea. But basically, that's how, you know, fate is. It just took me in a total different direction. So the book is about that, you know, about my childhood, about the 70s, about, you know, all the stories of all of the great people and that world that I entered into. But also it's about, you know, my failures and the obstacles and the challenges that I faced, and the husbands and the relationships, and you know, losing custody of my child. Some really, really dark moments for myself, because I feel that, you know, failures are what happens on your way to success. And also I feel that as an African American, and because of our history, we don't really talk about our past a lot. My grandparents didn't talk about what happened and what they had to do and what they had to bear. And I wanted to break that cycle. I wanted to leave my story. And so hopefully, you know, you all will laugh and cry and enjoy this story and really get to know me. One part of that story and one part of me writing the memoirs and started in 2013 was to finally reveal my encounter with Bill Cosby. And I started to tell the writer about what happened, about being drugged by Bill Cosby, and she's not very surprised. Well, she's a journalist, so she had heard a lot about this in the past. So I was surprised that she wasn't surprised. And we wrote the chapter up and we sent it into our publisher and our editor, and the word got back, we can't not put that chapter in the book. This is a legal liability for us, and we don't want it. And I wasn't surprised or disappointed. Just, you know, that's the way things are. I told my story, and that was one of the times that I've told it, and I've never told it to anyone else before that time. So I was satisfied. And so it wasn't until after the Vanity Fair, I wrote the article for Vanity Fair, article about this encounter, because I saw these other women on television talking about their stories, and I realized that their story was very similar to mine, and that I knew they were telling the truth. And by the grace of God, I wasn't raped. I wasn't sexually assaulted, because I got out of there somehow. Whatever my survival instincts were at that moment, I made it out. And I wrestled with that for a few days. I had to call my daughter, who went to Cosby's home with me and met his family and everything. And, you know, I said, you know, Anansa, you know, remember what's going on television with Cosby? She said, yeah, I know. I said, you know, he drugged me. She said, oh no, Mom, that didn't happen to you. Oh no. I said, and I think I'm going to tell my story. Please don't. Oh, Mom, they're going to criticize you. They're going to, why? There's nothing in it for you. You know, why would you do that? Just let them do it. And I got no's from everyone. And, you know, I wrestled with this. Brian said, you know, whatever you decide, Beverly. And then I made one call. It was very late at night. And I consider Sheila Johnson my mentor. And Brian said, why don't you call Sheila? And it was a little late, but for some odd reason, Sheila answered the phone. And I told her what I had already written this article. I don't know whether to tell Graydon Carter, who was the editor at Vanity Fair, whether I want to go through with it or not. You know, Black Lives Matter, he's a pillar of the black community. You know, do I want to do this? And Sheila said, you know, you've got to speak your truth. And I'm so blessed that I did just that. Because as difficult as it was, and as difficult as it has been, I feel a sense of life reaffirming in a way of my soul, my principles in my conscience, and my connection to my higher power. So I thank you for that bit of advice from someone who has a perspective that is not like mine or my family or my friends who are really protective of me, but who sees the world in a bigger plane, as we all can all see how she sees the world. She sees the world differently than we, and it was the best decision I ever made. Needless to say, after all of this came out, I got a call from the editor and said, you know, about that Cosby chapter, we want to put it in. I'm like, oh, okay. And for me, that resonated in the sense that women have been trying to tell their story all along, and nobody wanted it, and nobody wanted to hear it. And as women in society, we are taught to be voiceless. We are taught, don't make waves, don't say anything, speak quietly, it's okay. And it was time for that to stop. So what's happened with the Cosby situation, I feel, is that it's brought up a bigger conversation. And that's the conversation of violence against women. We are finally having that conversation in America. It's very hard to find a woman, or you know a friend or a cousin or your mother or a sister that has not been sexually assaulted, sexually molested, or sexually harassed. It's very hard to find a woman that has not gone through something like that in their life. And if my coming forward, or these women coming forward, talking about what happened in their lives that totally traumatized their lives, they can't get anything from it, some of them. But if it moves the needle, and if it moves the conversation for women, then it was all worth it. And so I thank you all for listening to my story. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer. Don't all rush me at once.
Can we just highlight something else, which I think is, maybe a lot of people don't realize this, but you were the first African-American model on the cover of Vogue. That was in 1974, and then in 75, the French version of Elle magazine,
That's
right?
correct. That's correct. That's correct.
I remember that because I remember sitting in my room with the copy. God, I wish I had saved it.
Me too.
And I was just so proud of you. I mean, you really broke a barrier.
Yes, thank you.
And because the world of modeling is so hard to break into.
Yes.
And especially if you're a woman of color.
Yes.
And that is still going on even to this day. We see fewer and fewer of them. What they're doing is they're using actresses now,
Yes.
and they're getting away with it.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that they aren't beautiful, I think it's great, but for those women who really, women of color who want to become models, it's like they've been
Yes.
pushed to the side. And if you're not an actress, you know,
Yes.
it's hard.
So that, I mean, that was a defining moment. Thank you for bringing it up. How could I forget that? I mean, this is the cover. I mean, that was a defining moment in my life, without a doubt. I mean, it's every model's dream to be on the cover of Vogue magazine.
Yeah.
And when I went to Eileen Ford, and I had been in the business like maybe 3 years, and I was giving her my list of things that I wanted to do, and she was the first woman that I knew that yielded that kind of power, in the industry. I mean, she could call up Ford Motors and say, listen, you won't get any more models if you don't do things my way. And I've never been around a woman that had that kind of power. My mother had power, but not that kind of power. So I went to her and I said, I want to do a beauty book, I want a cosmetic contract, and I want to be on the cover of Vogue. She said, oh, you'll never be on the cover of Vogue. So I knew enough to know that when Eileen Ford said something, she meant it. And I didn't ask why. I knew that I had to go somewhere where they felt I could achieve the cover of Vogue magazine. And so I left. I didn't burn any bridges. I left, and I said, it's a business decision, was why I'm leaving. And hopefully, I'd like to come back if things don't work out. But I went to Wilhelmina Models. And Wilhelmina was a model of hers, of Eileen Ford, and she went on her own with her own modeling agency. And that's where I got the cover of Vogue magazine. I can remember like it was yesterday when she made that phone call to me and said, she said, you're on the cover. I'm like, on the cover? On the cover of what? She said, you're on the cover of Vogue magazine. And I was like, really? She said, yeah. I remember putting on my clothes, running down to, because then they had the magazines and newsstands, and it was like a banner all around this newsstand. And I remember, stopping when I got to the corner, and I remember seeing that picture, like, this banner. And I was like, oh my God, and it's pretty too, because you didn't know back then whether you were going to get a pretty picture or not, because they didn't really know how to photograph us yet, And I was like, oh my God, and it's pretty too. And I was just waiting in line, because, people are, it's early in the morning, rush hour, and they're waiting to get their, there's pack of cigarettes and their coffee and the newspaper. And I'm like, could they hurry up, hurry up? And I got up there, and, it's Vogue magazine, he gave me the cover, and I was like, oh my God, this is me, this is me, this is me. The guy's like, yeah, could you hurry up, lady? I'm like, this is me. And then I look and I didn't bring my money because I ran out of the house, and I said to the guy, I said, listen, I'll be right back. And this is me on the cover, and I live right around the corner, I'll bring the money back. He said, if this were you on the cover, you would have the money. I said New Yorkers. So I had to give it back, and then I went to the phone booth. You guys remember the phone booth? Remember the phone booth, and I made a collect call. Some of you remember the collect call, right? I made a collect call to my mother. I got on the cover of Vogue. She didn't really know. She was screaming too, but she didn't really know. Oh, Mom, I'm on the cover of Vogue. It was like all the guys that I couldn't get at Harvard and Tufts, I was going to get them now. It was like, okay, you have arrived. You are going to party. And then I got all these calls from all these journalists and people from all around the world going, you're the first African American to be on the cover of Vogue magazine. I'm like, I am? And that means they want to know, what do you feel about that? And what do you feel about Madison Avenue now accepting Black beauty in mainstream America? You are the face that broke this barrier. Now Black is beautiful, and young girls all over the world are looking at you saying, yes, we are beautiful. I'm going, holy moly, I thought I was going to party. Now I got to, and I didn't know about my history. I wasn't taught about my history, so I said, okay, God, I don't know why this is happening to me, but I'm going to do whatever I can to honor this. And I went on this self-discovery journey of who I am, where I came from, what is this thing about race? Because for me, it just didn't make sense. You know, like, we're all human beings, but it was real. It was a reality. And now I grew up really fast because of this cover. Because I wanted to do everything in my power to make sure that I acknowledge it and that I respect what has happened to me and that I respect just being there at that pivotal moment in history and what that meant. So, so I talk about that, and I talk about the business being, there were so many more black models in the 70s than there are today. I mean, there were black modeling agencies. I mean, you know, out of the 60s, we thought we had arrived. You know, we were like, it was like buzzing and humming. And then I went to Europe and I did the Elle magazine, which, you know, in France we thought, hey, you know, that's why Josephine Baker, Paul Robeson, and all these wonderful people went to France because it was supposedly a much more liberated place in regards to race. But Elle magazine, I became the first woman of color on that magazine. And so I, you know, constantly, you know, kept, you know, breaking barriers. And then I got a chance that I could actually, because there were no black makeup artists and black hairdressers in the business then. I mean, they would like touch my hair and go, oh, okay. They thought I was going to bite them or something. But, and there were no they didn't have any makeup for us. So, you know, I had a chance at one time when a makeup artist was really stoned on the job. This was Glamour magazine, I'll never forget. And I said, you know, this guy's really shaking, he's really stoned, I can't work on this. He said, yeah, I see. The editor said, yeah, I see. She said, I'm gonna have to let him go. She said, well, who will we get? I said, you know, I know someone. And she said, you do? You think they would be available? I said, yeah, I think they would be available. And so I was able to call Joey Mills, who was a black makeup artist. And Joey came in there, hi everybody. I said, Joey, you gotta be really quiet, you gotta be really serious now. This is your big chance, don't let me down. And he didn't. And it was, you know, when I was able to have the kind of leverage that I could have in the business, I was able to bring in the black makeup artists, and the black hairdressers, and the black designers, and, you know, and work with black photographers, and it was just, you know, very empowering in the sense that I had gotten to a level where I had the leverage. I couldn't do it in the beginning, but where I had the leverage that I could, you know, call some of the shots, you know, in the way of equal pay and things like that. So it's a very interesting journey through history, the book, and particularly the 70s. Everybody really wants to know about the 70s and, you know, Studio 54 and Andy Warhol and Elizabeth Taylor and Michael Jackson and, you know, what that was all about. And I always say, you know, I was working, I was traveling all over the world, you know, holidays and everything, we worked through, you know, Christmas Eve and Thanksgiving, there was none of that, we were always working. But I did go to Studio 54 once, for 3 days. Literally for 3 days, you did not come out of it. And when I finally said, hey, I gotta get out of here. I mean, Monday morning, I'm going to work, okay? I don't care if I have been up for 3 days. I went to work, and the hairdresser, he pulled a little piece of confetti out of my hair. He said, I know where you've been. I was like crazy. But anyways, so I take you through the whole ride of the 70s, the drugs, and the, you know, and then the 80s, the excess. It was even more, bigger shoulder pads, bigger hair, bigger everything, you know. And I stopped in the 80s, and hopefully you'll love my stories as much as some of the movie producers are loving my stories, in the sense of possibly doing a movie or a miniseries. And so Brian wanted to say one last thing.
No, I'm not done yet.
Okay. Yes.
We've sort of been on similar paths
Yes.
as first. So when we started Black Entertainment Television, just like what you did in the modeling world, how you were able to bring in more diversity into the modeling world, BET did the same thing and launched many, many careers, from Donnie Simpson to all of them. And so it's something that we need to think about, and even with this resort here, I wanted to be a model of something that I started. And you see the diversity sitting here in this room, you see the diversity on my staff. We need to continue this. And that's what's really important. So what you were able to contribute in the modeling world and really be able to open the eyes of white America and bring people of color into the makeup room, into the hairstyling. I mean, it has changed things. And the same thing has happened with BET, how we were able to get so many careers started. And it wasn't just as employers, but we have also launched careers of jazz artists. Marcus Johnson's one of them. I can name a whole bunch of them. But anyway, and also actors. And we still have a lot of that talent is still out there.
Oh, definitely. And it's so wonderful, you know, to be able to, you know, see ourselves, to see our own image. You know, it's an acknowledgement of life, you know, when you see yourself somewhere. And also, you most certainly are a trailblazer. And I know, you know, for my journey as a trailblazer, it comes with the burns. Now I really understand what a trailblazer means, because you do have the burns to show it. And your journey was unbelievable. I mean, you empowered us in a way that, I mean, I can't even begin, and it still leaves an amazing legacy. And it just goes to show about your vision. And I mean, because, I mean, who knew, you know, people say, you know, black entertainment television, you know, people say, well, you know, we're already on television. And it's just, you know, how that really impacted, you know, the world, you know, and I really thank you for that.
Are there any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So I guess the biggest question I have not read your book, but I will. But it sounds like you were a diamond in the rough originally when you first, you know, entered the modeling arena. You said you wore sweats and you were a swimmer and all this stuff, and you didn't even believe that you would evolve into who you are today.
Right.
But I guess my question is, how was that process for you? Like, you know, I mean, clearly it had to be pretty tough, right? And then there weren't people, I guess a lot of models who looked like you on top of that.
Sure.
How was that initial transition into the industry for you?
So what happens for me is that,
Without giving away too much.
yes, without giving away too much of the book, is that for me, it was just like anything else. It's like swimming. You know, I did it in the morning before I went to school, and I did it at night. So I had a discipline. And then with school, I had a sense of discovery, and I was curious, and I wanted to do well. So for me, going into the modeling world was just like a thesis paper. I wanted to know who the best photographers are, who the best agencies are, who the best, you know, I wanted to know what was what. Where is the lay of the land? How do you go about this? You know, Eileen Ford is the best agency. Even though she turned me down at first, when she called me back 3 days later and said, you lost so much weight, I said, okay, I got it. Okay, it's a lot of smoke and mirrors here, but I want to go with her because she's the best. So I came from a different kind of mindset, and I had some fabulous gay gurus in my life who just molded me, who taught me about theater and opera, and I didn't know anything about theater and opera, and Tiffany's and diamonds and all of that, you know, was, you know, my gay, and I just soaked it up like a sponge, you know, and they gave me books to read, and, you know, about the four fabulous faces of Greta Garbo and Bette Midler, and, you know, they taught me all about Bette Midler, Joan Crawford, and these great beauties of yesteryears, and Dorothy Dandridge and Lena Horne, and all of these, you know, Josephine Baker, you know, reading autobiographies about their careers and how. So I had, you know, people. Nobody makes it by themselves. You know, it's impossible to make it alone. So it was a whole team of people that helped.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I was curious about if you've done anything on the continent of Africa too, because I have to study African affairs, so I wanted to hear something. I know as an African American, I mean, you've impacted me as well as many others here on this continent, but I would be curious to hear some of your specific experiences on the continent of Africa.
Oh yeah, it was wonderful. As a matter of fact, I talk about it in the book.
Okay.
About a woman who comes to me. This is at my heyday. I think it was like 1975. She's talking to me about this documentary that they want to do in Africa, and you know, they want an African American to come over. It was kind of like an American Express, you know, sponsored event. And I was like, oh, it sounds wonderful. And she said, have you ever been to Africa? I said, no, I've never been to Africa. She says, well, you know, I said, well, how much is it for the film? She says, well, there's no money in documentaries. And I was like, wait, I'm not used to hearing no money, you know. The clock is ticking. I'm like, you know, I'm trying to burn, you know, while I'm there. And so she said, but if I were an African American, I would do it. And that was my first trip to Africa, and it was just, I went to the island of Gore where you saw where I mean, it was just, once again, just changed my whole world. Then I did films and everything in Africa, and been there many times. Yes, Lana?
First of all, I thoroughly enjoyed the book. I have one more chapter to read, and really impressed with your attitude and everything that you said that you were going to do, that you did it. My question is very trivial, but it's just stuck with me. Your friend, the gay friend who taught you everything, whatever happened to him? You said you never saw him again.
I never saw him again.
So is he dead, or did you?
I never saw him again.
Really?
I never saw him again. Hopefully the book will I'll have some closure.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody's going to have to read the book. She's talking. Yes.
I'm sure this is addressed in the book, which I will read.
Yes.
Very nice to meet you. Thank you for this opportunity. I often think about the Tyra Banks and Naomi Campbell comparisons, and then yourself and Iman.
Yes.
Was there sort of a rivalry between the two of you?
Yes.
Okay.
But a good rivalry. You know,
word.
It's a good rivalry. I think rivalry is good. I think it creates competition.
Right.
It brings out the best in people.
Sure.
But also, my predecessor was Naomi Sims, who was the top model when I came in, and how graciously she treated me, and how she said, there's enough room for everyone, and how she encouraged my career, how she invited me to all of her cocktail parties. I mean, I wore my hair pulled back like her. She started the wigs and the makeup line, Naomi Sims, and a lot of people don't know about her. That's why I put her in the book. But that was my model, to be able to treat others that were coming up behind me, was to embrace them and to know that we live in an abundant universe and there's enough for everyone.
Question here? Thank you.
Yes.
Would you do us the honor of reading something from the book?
Really? Do we? Sure.
We can do that.
Oh, bring me my glasses. What are you trying to say, my age? Bring me the glasses. Okay, I'm just going to do just a little because I want you guys to go over advice of the book. But anyways,
She gave you a lot of information.
yes. I'm just going to do, the first chapter is called Who's That Girl? I never really thought I was pretty, not that I gave my looks much thought at all while growing up in Buffalo, New York. Let's be clear, there were more than a few attractive people residing in the Johnson family household. You can start with my mother, Gloria, then move on to my two gorgeous sisters, Joanne and Sheila. But not me, never me. So we went through that. So I want to go all the way to doing this fashion show for Halston, because runway models and photogenic models was two different categories. We were the cover girls, right? We were the real deal. I mean, no offense. But we were like on the covers of everything. Everyone knew our names. You could go down the street and they'd be like, oh, that's a model. And And runway was a totally different field. They worked with the designers, and they didn't get paid as much as we did, and they had relationships with designers. But of course, myself, being very curious, I wanted to work with the designers. I wanted to know that part of the business. And so I fought Eileen Ford on letting me do that. And Halston was a very famous designer in the 70s. He actually created the pillbox hat for Jacqueline Kennedy, and went on to be a great designer. And he was the first designer that said, okay, let the cover girl come over and do the show. And he was famous for his parties. And so after that show, he invited me to one of his parties. So it was in August 1973, the height of Halston's glory days on Madison Avenue. And there I was standing on West 63rd Street, trying my best to figure out where exactly I was going. It was the hottest summer afternoon I could remember in New York City, and the heat wasn't doing my perfectly layered makeup any favors. I hurried down the street in the heels, of course, trying to read the house numbers. It seemed like the sun's powerful rays were the universe's way of punishing me for jumping out of the cab before I had my bearings. Even though I was still in my early 20s, my life had already become an endless blur of appointments, interviews, and meetings. My light list had already begun to appear on a bevy of magazine covers and in advertisements, but I was just learning how to navigate the peaks and valleys of what that exposure really meant for me. And since this wasn't quite the adult life I had envisioned for myself while growing up, I was still adjusting to the madness of running from one photo shoot or fashion fitting to another. The sheer weight of the logistics could easily fragile anyone's nerve on any given day. If that weren't enough, I was also encountering some self-inflicted personal drama in the forms of an ex-husband who refused to comprehend the true meaning of ex. Many days I found myself just trying to keep my head above waters. Don't get me wrong, I loved the life I was living, but I wasn't always prepared for the nonstop demands and pressure it presented. Somehow I had gotten on a fast-moving roller coaster ride, and I wasn't at the control. Still, even with all that background noise in my head, I couldn't afford to be out of sorts that afternoon. I had to appear flawless when I entered Halston's party, and flawless is what I was determined to be. There could be no clothing mishaps and no evidence that my perfectly applied makeup had encountered a sweltering New York City day. While I was enjoying a booming career in the world of high fashion at the time, I knew I had really arrived when I received an invite to a dinner party at the home of one of the world's most prominent designers. Halston was by far the most celebrated, influential designer of the 70s, and I loved him something fierce. Everyone did. Halston, one name was all he needed, emerged as the first billion-dollar fashion designer in the world of haute couture and single-handedly developed the blueprint for the likes of Oscar, Ralph, Calvin, and Diane to become household names the world over. Until Halston appeared on the scene, most of the highly respected, famed, and grand design houses were located in Europe, in either Paris or Milan. And Halston would change that day. He created a pillbox hat for Jacqueline Kennedy to wear as she watched her husband take the oath of office of the President of the United States in 1961. And after that major coup, the Halston design routinely graced the bodies of some of the world's most stylishly stunning women. Fabulous ladies such as Lauren Hutton, Princess Grace of Monaco, Ali McGraw, Bianca Jagger, Liza Minnelli, and Lauren Bacall were photographed regularly in his couture design. Then, of course, there was me. I've always been fascinated by each and every aspect of the fashion industry, and Halston was the first to take my call when I yearned to learn even more. He agreed to put me in his runway show at the time, when well-known print models, which I was at the time, rarely did such a thing. Runway modeling was considered a few steps beneath print during the 60s and early 70s, but that did little to discourage me from wanting to be on the runway. As far as I was concerned, a rule wasn't a rule until somebody had the gall to break it. Thankfully, Halston was happy to oblige me. Early one week in 1973, I strolled in his show wearing several of his sleekly haltered neck dresses and wide-leg jersey trousers. I loved every minute of it. Despite my initial terror of sashaying around a room filled with potential buyers and New York socialites, my first foray into the world of runway modeling had been as seamless as one of the Halsey's priciest cashmere designs. So what happened was, when I first went into the party, Halston's home was like all on levels. There was no railings on the stairways. There were just levels, and I'm thinking to myself, somebody's gonna fall off here. I mean, I was just, I couldn't believe it. And then on one level were two people dancing. It was Pat Cleveland, a very famous fashion model. She looks like Josephine Baker. And Sterling St. John, who was dark as he was the most beautiful man I've ever met. And they were dancing on this platform, and I couldn't think but, oh my God, they're gonna fall off and kill themselves. And Halston comes down in the party, long cigarette hole, darling, darling. And I'm, kind of looking around and everything, and and then before I knew it, Pat Cleveland and Sterling St. Jock are down in the party. But they had on leotards at first, but now they're in the party in the nude. And I'm like, okay, am I the only one looking at them? They don't have any clothes on, I'm the only little black thing there, and it's them. And Sterling, of course, has, covering his small, but not so small, he had something covering here. But Pat had her pubic hairs waxed in the shape of a heart. And she was like, "Do you like my heart?" And I'm like, oh my God, are people really, I was like, everyone was just carrying on just like nothing was happening. So finally I decide that, okay, enough of this. And they call it dinner time, and we walk up the rail of stairs, people, trying to make up there. And I see this one table, it's like a block of ice. It was like the Antarctic. It was like this plexiglass table. And I said, okay, I'm gonna sit there. And it had all these, Elsa Paredes Voltus candles and everything. It was like exquisite. Now I'm still haven't spoken to anybody but Halston. So I sit at the table, and I'm like, okay, Beverly, say something. You gotta say something. You cannot just sit here and don't. You have to say something. So I look up, and I see these purple eyes, violet eyes, and I realize it's Elizabeth Taylor. I'm like, say something, say something. And she's looking at me. I'm like, hi, Miss Taylor, I like your ring. She says, this old thing? And she takes it off and she throws it across the table, and I catch it because I thought it was going to break the table. And I take the ring and she says, put it on, put it on. And I'm like shaking now. And the ring is about this big, right? It's the Richard Burton ring, the 69.4 carat ring. So I put it on, and then I take it off. I said, oh, it's very pretty. I give it to her. She said, no, keep it, keep it. I said, no. She says, keep the ring. And everybody's laughing at the table. So now everybody's moving around, and I'm following Elizabeth Taylor. All I can see is like this little black girl came in and stole it. I'm following her around, and she's like, going all around talking to everybody, and now I'm sweating, right? And so finally, she calls me over, and she says, sit down next to me, and I finally give her the ring back. Here, take this ring. I don't need that. And she says, I hear you're the new it girl in town. And I'm going, me? I'm speaking to Elizabeth Taylor. I'm going, you're the it woman in the world. And she's dripping in diamonds. And anyway, she was so wonderful and so nice and so kind. And it was a lesson for me as to being that, people are just people.
Right.
And so that was my first big part. Anyway, that's